Okay, we are on air, and I don't know if the other members are coming. It is a Wednesday. We normally meet on Thursday, but last Thursday was Thanksgiving, and we don't have this committee meeting in December usually, so wanted to make sure we got the regular monthly report and had a public discussion about some of these items. So we'll go ahead and get started with the Community Planning and Transportation Committee meeting for Wednesday, November 30th, 2022. Got a couple items on the agenda. The first one is our regular public transit ridership report, or just general report about public transit in Norman. And again, just everybody listening and watching, as I mentioned in all of our meetings, if public transit is an issue that's important or of an interest to you, then this is the committee that I strongly encourage you to engage with and follow along with on YouTube or here in person if you like at City Hall. But this is where we talk about public transit every month and where we get updates about ridership numbers and our projects that we have going on, our route changes, and also things like road construction projects and other items related to that. So again, if that's of interest to you, this is the place for you. And we have Taylor here from city staff to talk about the ridership report.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I'll try to be brief as always. Probably the biggest update on our report that's in your packet is our public participation process on the route changes, which that public comment period concluded on November 21st. And there's just a little taste of what we heard and how many people attended here in this report, with a more robust public engagement report coming to you during your December 13th City Council meeting. Okay. But we had 21 individuals that attended over those 3 meetings. So they were able to provide comments there, or outside of the public meetings, comments could be submitted by email, phone call, online form, or mail. We're like I said, we're compiling all that feedback, and it'll be in a much more robust form for that December 13th council meeting for council to review and take action on it as you all deem appropriate. But if approved, we'll move forward with implementation on those proposed changes, and we're hopeful we can hit the August 2023 deadline and get it all done right when school's starting and before football season and all that. But of course, we'll have to play with that with the transit center remodel and everything like that. So that's probably the biggest update on the general report. Do you have any questions about that public participation process?
Would you say it was mostly people that do ride the bus on a regular basis, or?
Yeah, it was a good mix. We had some additional folks from city staff that attended that are involved, but it was a good mix. We had a few paratransit riders attend, and then a couple folks attend that were fixed route riders. And then we didn't really ask them that in our questions. We didn't ask them to identify that, but. And then we got a lot of our comments through the email and back and forth that way. So you'll see all that correspondence verbatim in that report. So you'll see everything that they said to us and we said to them, and be able to review that.
Okay.
Moving on a little bit, our battery electric buses should be delivered this month. We're very excited. We're sending a couple of our staff members back to Gillig, the manufacturer, next week to finalize that process. And then they should ship them out after that. So we're hopeful to see them before Christmas. Probably won't be in service until January, because we'll have to do some final inspections, make sure they're roadworthy and they've been built. Even though we're already inspecting them next week, we want to make sure when they get here that nothing happened to them on the ride here. And then we're also going to work on our pre-production meeting for our 5 CNG buses that we have on order with Gillig next week. So again, I think I say this every month, but we have a lot of vehicles on order, 12 total, including the electric buses. So I'm very hopeful in the next year we'll make a lot of progress in our state of good repair for our fleet. And then the last thing I want to point to on our general report is the last bullet of website updates. We worked really closely with the traffic division and David's team to move a lot of the parking information around and put it under our web pages. We also made a more robust transit pages for people to be able to navigate and find information on the long-range plan or general operations. So we hope that council and the public will look at that and let us know if you have any feedback. But we hope it's a more robust place to go for any transit and parking information that you need, as well as e-scooters, which we've transitioned over us in the summer. And then for ridership, some good news there. I think we've upticked every month, but this month is good in particular. Yeah, significant.
Yeah.
We had almost 28,000 total riders compared to 24,000 last October. And we eclipsed the 1,000 riders per day month, or per day average daily for the month for the first time this fiscal year at 1,075 for the entire system. And so far, fiscal year to date, we've had 97,000 passengers, and that's about an 8% increase over last year at 89,000. Fixed route, I just want to point out that 1,000-day average riders was 999, so we almost eclipsed the 1,000. That's not a magic number, but we were doing that pre-pandemic pretty consistently, so I've been waiting for us to do that.
That's the year-to-date average?
That's just for October, the 999. So hopefully our average will be over 1,000 by the end of the fiscal year. And you can see there, as always, more information per route on the right side of that first page, and then there's more details even further into the report. Generally, most routes saw a pretty good gain, except for the Alameda East Norman route. And Saturday ridership was pretty heavily utilized, but that kind of ebb and flows with the football games, how many are in this month compared to the same month last year. So we take that with a grain of salt during this time period because the game days really affect it for Saturday service. But
Yeah, okay.
happy to answer any questions on ridership or anything else in the report.
Well, I appreciate the update. Yeah, I think it is very notable, the increase in ridership that we're seeing. And specifically, the Lindsay East route is like quad or triple the ridership numbers of all the other routes almost. Or the next highest route it's almost 4 times that. So that's pretty remarkable. We know that that's the heaviest route anyway, but
Right.
that's why I always encourage people, if you don't believe anybody rides the bus in Norman, I just would encourage you to hop on the East Lindsay route and check it out, because you'll probably be standing up, I would guess, most of the time when I see it. So, but even the West Norman route, which has long had the lowest one, and the one that we will, looks like we'll be eliminating with our route changes, has a 109% increase though from last year. It's only 309 people, but
Yeah.
that's a lot of an increase anyway from where it was. So that's significant. And good to see the Social Security one back up as always. 39 people, but that facility is remote by my standards. And so,
Yeah, we wish we had an office here in Norman so we could get people there
yeah,
more
that
regularly.
would make
but-
a lot of sense to me if we had that in a sub office in Norman or something.
Mhm.
Or at least somewhere that was serviced by a regular public transit route maybe.
Right.
But,
And the reason, I mean, Lindsay East is very significant compared to the rest of them, and that's why we were proposing to keep it 30-minute frequency in the route changes. And we even propose 15-minute frequency in future improvements because
Okay.
of how heavily utilized
yeah.
how heavily utilized it is.
That's, again, one of the things that makes that one the hardest to adjust as well, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
Because every stop is pretty heavily used. And,
Mhm.
yeah, well, I definitely appreciate that update. You mentioned too, before the meeting, about the transit center and progress on that.
Yeah, so kind of it's all has to track to get us to operate with the route changes by our goal of August of next year. But we're finalizing the design. We had to go back and do a little bit of value engineering to control costs a little bit. But we think we've done as much as we can, so we're going to go out there and let the private sector tell us what they think, how much it costs to get it to a state where we can use it. And then we'll likely go to council probably late January with that contract. We hope that's kind of the timeline on that.
Well, that's perfect. We
Again,
can,
it'll be a little tight trying to get that August deadline for us to operate, but we'll do our best to hit that.
well, we can always start with what we have and add on to it later when funding is available. So, okay, that's all that I have about that. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
All right, the second item on the agenda today is a discussion regarding traffic management around the University of Oklahoma campus. This was a topic I'd wanted to discuss. It's been an issue forever, of course, traffic management around the campus, but with discussions about moving to the SEC, of course, and possible campus expansion and the demolition of the dorm towers and rebuilding new housing and whatever, and the expansion of the football facilities, I guess, that they're planning around Jenkins and Lindsay, I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to talk about how we plan to manage traffic around campus going forward and working with the university. And specifically, Elm and Lindsay Street is a big thorn in my side, and it continues to be, and I know for the city as well. Jenkins and Brooks as well has been another one of those. So getting emails out throughout the years from students and folks that live around that area. I live around that area. So, yeah. So anyway, I appreciate you being here to talk about this with us.
Okay. We'll just jump right in. Two things that kind of drive what we do around campus are, of course, our comprehensive transportation plan was approved in 2014. But the 2019 transportation bond election had projects on Lindsay Street in it, so there's those issues to consider as well. And then at the end, we'll talk about some next steps. Again, our comprehensive plan was approved by council in May of 2014. A number of action items within that document that serve as a kind of a map for roadway improvement projects, for potential projects that we could submit to ACOG for federal funding, or as a potential bicycle pedestrian project for a future ACOG or ODOT transportation alternatives project. Both of those, that document has been money for those two projects to give us that map forward. Some of the things that were part of the comprehensive transportation plan was an element called special corridors. Lindsay Street was one of those because it just doesn't fit most of the traditional definitions of roadway types.
It's an arterial section line road, but
Right.
it runs through an old historic neighborhood and through the campus.
Right.
Yeah.
It's 2 lanes in some places,
Yes,
and
yes.
it's hard to get much more than 2 lanes, to be honest with you, in some of those. So this term special corridor was coined for it, along with Porter, Flood, James Garner, and portions of Berry Road. But the comprehensive plan tried to identify these areas that we needed to pay special attention to when it came time to suggest improvements along a corridor that was deemed as special. The James Garner Avenue connection to Flood Avenue, that's probably going to start construction, in January maybe? Will have significant impact on traffic coming into downtown, and eventually that could get to Jenkins and Lindsay, for example. They're going to have a new route to get to the stadium, if that's what their destination is. If it's just a campus, they're going to have a new route to get there now. So that's going to provide us opportunities, but it's also going to create some challenges along the way. And we'll have to navigate through those.
That left turn at Jenkins and Brooks going south.
Well, we did make a change to the signal and allowed an arrow to come up.
Okay.
So that has helped, I hope.
I think I've been through it then since then, because
Yeah, we did that. I mean, my predecessor was very opposed to that, and I never really understood what that
Well, every time
opposition was.
somebody
was
wanted to
for.
turn left and go east on Brooks,
They were the
through
only
traffic
one-
never
right,
stopped, and so
right.
you were just
And they were preventing all the
Yeah.
backup of through to the north that was trying to go south. So we introduced a left turn arrow that will come on at the beginning of
Okay.
the green to allow,
Perfect.
if the one in front is the one that wants to turn left, or the 2 in front, they can get out of the way and everybody else can flow.
I've just been avoiding going down.
You-
I don't go south
you-
on Jenkins through there, and I haven't for years because
Give it
I had
another
to-
try. See if it's better.
Well, I think that had to do with buses too. We had our routes trying to turn there.
Yes, yes,
35-foot
yeah,
buses
yes.
trying to turn.
Well, if you ever spent time
Relaying those
just
signals.
watching the cameras and all the people who would come out of the parking lots north of there, sometimes they couldn't even get out because
Yeah.
southbound traffic was backed up past Felgar.
Yeah.
And we need to do something to
That's
get
what
rid
kind
of
of
it.
made me think, well, if James Garner's now going to connect to it, more traffic will come down through there, and that's just going to.
So we.
Okay, perfect.
We make a little longer left turn arrow come up maybe and
Stop avoiding-
address some of that.
stop
Yeah,
avoiding
give
that
give it
area.
a try and let me know what you think of that. Because that's been in place for, I'm going to say a year.
I've been avoiding it for a couple years.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
thank you.
The transportation bond project package in 2019. The election was held in on April 2nd, 2019. Proposition 1 was for a $72 million transportation bond, which would undertake 19 transportation projects. That proposition passed by a margin of nearly 2-1, just over 9,000 votes for, 4,600 votes against. The Lindsay Street Special Corridor between Pickard and Jenkins comprised 2 of the 19 total projects. Here's a map showing all the projects where they were throughout that election. And a list of those projects. And let's see, Lindsay Street Special Corridor, Pickard to Elm was identified in 2029. And Lindsay's, where's the other one? 2027? Yeah, 2027, Lindsay Street Special Corridor from Elm to Jenkins. Let's see, one was identified as a almost $4 million project. The other one was almost a $3 million project. So significant funds were set aside in that bond election to make improvements on Lindsay Street. Some of the things that we have done in the area, traffic management, special corridors and streetscape projects have been done from that bond election. This is, let's see, these are, I think, on Main Street. Is that what those pictures are, Shannon?
These are, yeah.
Yeah.
I think those are mostly
Main Street?
Yep, West Main.
Okay. But there's projects that are coming up. James Garner Avenue, two phases of James Garner Avenue, hopefully. Well, the one should be under construction in January. We hope the other one gets bid, would be eligible to be bid in October of next year. Porter Streetscape should be under construction about the same time as James Garner, or the first phase of James Garner. And then we had the Lindsay Street Special Corridor that was identified, and the Gray Street two-way conversion were some of the projects that were kind of in this same sort of area. A little bit of project details on the special corridor between Pickard and Jenkins. Wanted to try to get left turn lanes at intersections, try to get rid of some of those left turn prohibitions during some times of the day. Maybe we could move traffic a little better if we can get the left turn out of the through lane and get it in its own lane. Traffic would flow quite a bit better. Try to provide some bicycle lanes, improve sidewalks that may not be continuous throughout the whole corridor, things like that. Curb and gutter that would help with drainage.
We now have a continuous sidewalk, thankfully, on Lindsay, all the way on the north side at least.
Right.
Because, I remember sometimes walking in that ditch over the years, and it's
But
nice to have that connection now, for sure.
There's still some gaps on the south side though, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But before there was not, well, all the way between Barry and Pickard was nothing before, you know. And you didn't even have a shoulder at the bridge to really walk across either.
Right.
It's treacherous.
Of course, obviously, OU is a key stakeholder in that particular project. Lindsay Street, before, during, and since the passage of the bond package, been a lot of local discussion regarding the conversion of Lindsay Street between Elm and Jenkins, perhaps to a pedestrian mall. That might make some sense, but it doesn't. It's not in line with you're shaking your head no, like that's not what you've heard?
I've heard that, and I would probably be more favorable to it if there was another street south of there or north of there that was east-west.
It was
but
able to carry
Timberdale
that traffic
is-
that's going to have to move.
Yeah, Imhoff is a mile down, and Timberdale is a little street and doesn't go through
Right.
to the other side. So I would find that to be very problematic for
In
moving.
Timberdale's
I mean, I
not as-
like the idea for sure. I like the idea of pedestrian malls and
Right.
whatnot, but that would seem to be very problematic for moving traffic in Norman,
Well, and it's.
South Norman.
From what I'm presenting, there's roadblocks to that anyway, because number one, we've got a comprehensive transportation
Yeah.
plan that doesn't recognize that. And number two, we have an election of the voters that was overwhelmingly in favor of some
No.
improvement to the corridor.
I would like to make sure that part of the reason for this discussion too is, making sure that however we design that road project is extremely favorable towards pedestrian movement.
Absolutely.
Maybe additional funding could even be identified where there's, the people aren't, it's separated. Pedestrian walkways over or under it, I'm not sure.
Well, and
That type of scale of project is what I would maybe even think about in parts of it so that the pedestrians aren't even interacting with the street anymore. I don't know. But
if you drive through there regularly, which I know you do, but Van Vliet does not work.
Right, yeah. The ASP
For
one
so
right
many
there.
reasons, because they're tied together as if they're one signal, so if somebody's.
Person hits it.
They all three turn red or green at the same time.
Yeah, which makes sense when it's real busy with
But when
student
it's not.
traffic. Yeah.
It doesn't.
And people are in the habit of pressing the button even when there's no cars. I've noticed it many times where there's no cars coming, or there might be one, and they'll press the button anyway, and it's like, you could have just waited till that car went by and then walked. So, but yeah, I mean, who knows what could change in the years ahead, but I would not foresee us being favorable towards shutting the whole street down permanently like that without any other alternate east-west.
Right. Yeah,
route.
that would have to be definitely part of the discussion, and when we redo
It'd be like a
our-
4-mile detour to go all the way down and go across and then come back up to the other side of the
Yeah.
stadium on Lindsay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when we revisit our comprehensive transportation plan, that can certainly become a topic of discussion at that point, and probably should become a topic of
That was really
discussion.
the finding of council,
Yeah.
with the comprehensive transportation plan, was that the university really was promoting this, and we all concluded, and council concluded, it just wasn't
Yeah.
ready. And they're in the term special corridor,
Right.
and all the things you mentioned, Councilman Holland, that these are the things we want to do when we build the improvements. So it went from the 2014 comprehensive plan to the 2019 bond program, and now we're fully funded to do hopefully all those things.
And quite honestly, throughout the development of the comprehensive plan, this is what started that whole, like Sean said, started that whole special corridor. The other one's just like, well, let's put that over there too.
Well, and to the, like assuring folks that the section between Pickard and Elm, the residential area, was not going to be widened to 4 lanes. And I think the bridge at Imhoff Creek definitely put in stone, if you will, to people that look, Lindsay Street's not going to be a 4 or 5 lane street through here.
Right.
Maybe not in the next 50 years. So part of that special corridor too is like ensuring that we have control over how we do this, and we can take a scalpel to it if we need to adjust it to preserve trees and preserve those, yards and everything. So
Because if it's identified as an arterial road, then that a connotation to somebody is going to be, that's a 4-lane road.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean through Okay.
Was I done with that slide? Oh, yeah. Obviously, the move to the SEC is spurring some of these, like you alluded to earlier. Again, the comprehensive plan does not recommend that Lindsay be converted to anything like a pedestrian mall, so that would obviously have to be entirely revisited if that is the direction that anybody wants to go, if it's OU or anybody else. I'm not saying that it is, but
Yeah, right,
if
yeah.
it is. And obviously that bond package didn't address something like that either, and you have to figure out how you're gonna circumvent a voter election that was pretty overwhelming in favor of some kind of improvement. And right now, that portion of Lindsay Street, like you said, carries traffic. The current volumes are 14,000 cars a day, so if you convert it to a pedestrian mall, those 14,000 cars gotta go somewhere. And you'd think Chautauqua to,
They're all little 2-lane streets over there.
Yeah, I mean-
No,
Imhoff has its issues, but I mean, Timberdale is not even a city street, it's a university street, so it'd be hard to take it there, into Jenkins and back up.
Chautauqua's only a 2-lane street, and not really room to
Right,
widen that.
even though
Yeah,
that's in our comprehensive plan too.
right. So, a couple things. I think that is a major piece, and the idea of like I said, pedestrian mall sounds really good, but the traffic there is an issue, and there not being another close by way to reroute that traffic. So, it could be a case where like the university and the state and the city have to kind of maybe join up and think of a big project where, yeah, it may seem weird, but like the street goes under, or from Elm to Asp is a tunnel. That's where they build a pedestrian thing above it. I don't see a way that we'd be able to completely eliminate traffic through there, as nice as that would be, and it moves really slow, so it's,
Sure.
but the congestion is an issue.
You'd have to think about how there's parking garages on Asp and things, how those people would get down to the pressed section of Lindsay
Right,
too.
yeah.
It
there's
almost creates more problems than it
not a lot of
solves.
room to move around
Right.
there, so.
It's kind of pricey real estate too, I think.
Yeah, what would they do with their parking garage if there was no street to get to it anymore? So those are definitely things big ones to think about on Lindsay for sure. Lindsay and Elm Street, the traffic going southbound on Elm Street. You can't turn right when it's red, and there's no left turn lane, no left turn signal, and there's usually a lot of traffic coming from the south going north that's also either trying to turn and go west or go north. And so we end up in that. I've seen it back up past Brooks before, from Elm past Brooks for people in the afternoons. And so that one has been a big concern, and especially if SEC and there's growth in the campus and whatnot, that I wanted us to keep thinking about how we would address that. Maybe you already know, but Boyd Street from Classen to Flood. So we had talked about previously in the Center City discussions about a road diet perhaps, and it being 3 lanes, especially because of the issue at Boyd and Asp with the no turn on red and no left turn lane or no turn, and
Right.
people really get impatient waiting to turn right there, and people are walking across the street and they walk too slow, and people are like pulling up next to them trying to, and how we might deal with that. The 3-lane option to me seems like that could help with the.
And the CTP did address
Right.
just that. I don't know how much they put into the analysis of that, because the left turn lane helps an awful lot
Yes, yeah.
with the movements at University and Asp, for example. But taking 2 lanes and putting them into one, I don't know how that's going to work. I've got my doubts that that's going to work well. I think that needs to be something else that's brought.
Right.
This needs to be studied in
With,
depth.
yeah, Boyd only being 4 lanes from Flood to Classen, and it being narrow and
Right.
all that. I guess it's probably the same width as Porter and Main and Gray, that 3-lane width, but 4 skinny lanes marked on it. So how we manage traffic at Boyd and Asp, I keep hearing from businesses and others about that. And we've talked about maybe looking at pedestrian scramble there before. If any intersection, Norman was one to experiment with that. That's where there seems to be the most people trying to cross.
You know,
it.
we did experiment on that once before.
Okay. Didn't work out well. I assume.
Well, since I've been in Norman, that was my single most embarrassing day.
Really?
At the city of Norman, because we actually drove from Elm to Jenkins, and it took us 20 minutes to go that length of Boyd.
Okay.
It was awful. We did it on a Thursday, I think, and I had to call my guys in on overtime to take it out on a Saturday.
When do you think that was?
2014 or 15, I think.
Okay. Well, good to know.
We actually did it at both University and Asp,
Okay.
because you want to do it someplace
I'll
that's
stop. and
Yes.
pedestrians can cross at any
Yes.
point.
It sounds wonderful in theory, but
Right.
man, when you got everybody stopped and they don't want to be stopped,
Right.
it's not a pleasant thing.
Well, how Boyd Street functions around the campus right there, and the idea of the road diet, I would definitely like us to start exploring that further about whether it's feasible, and would the benefit of a dedicated turn middle lane through there be a benefit over just having 4 skinny lanes?
Right.
Because people want to turn left, then it backs up, so that middle lane becomes kind of unusable anyway a lot of times.
Right.
Would bike lanes fit on it, that type of thing. And then, because, we had kind of talked about that tying into Classen being on a road diet through through Lincoln and the residential neighborhood, and potentially Porter at some point all the way up to Robinson. And then, of course, Main and Gray Street are both 3-lane streets, and kind of have it, and James Garner, and having it all tie in is a nice deal. So I definitely want to continue those discussions. And then I wanted to talk about Jenkins, of course, because of the extension and potential growth in the campus. And then, let's see, now that you mentioned that the Jenkins and Brooks was addressed, I will drive through there today and check it out.
Okay.
But that's a big one right there that I just have been continuing to think about, so that's a good one. But really, that really touches on the main issues I've heard over the past few years from students on campus, from faculty on campus, from myself living right there on campus on College Street, and what I kind of experience. And I've worked out how to navigate through without what lights to miss, and what street to take to get the gap in the traffic where I can zoom across Lindsay Street real quick without waiting.
Right.
And which way to avoid coming the other direction. So, but as all these changes are going on around campus, and SEC move and potential growth, and these projects that we have that I don't know a lot of folks are aware of, that we have approved some of these projects,
Right.
and that we do have plans. So I did want to make sure that we kind of refreshed that discussion here, and we had a recording of it for anybody to reflect back on. And then hopefully at a near future meeting with the rest of council, we can kind of go over it as well and see if we might need to make any decisions about which directions to move.
Well, I think from my standpoint, it helps to hear what you're saying, because honestly, I don't know if we knew exactly what to prepare for tonight. It seemed more like the pedestrian mall, but that's kind of not where you were
Yeah,
headed. So.
really just that
So
square
hearing
around
that,
campus
yeah,
is
that helps.
Yeah, Jenkins and Lindsay and Elm and Boyd. I mean, ancillary streets, Timberdale and all that around there, but that square around the main campus and how we can deal with traffic management going forward through there is I think important. And hopefully the university might be interested in joining us in some of those discussions. They're certainly, if any of them are watching, certainly welcome anytime.
They will be impacted for sure. So,
Yes. Okay. Well, I definitely appreciate that, and would encourage any council members that watch this meeting to reach out to you if they have any questions or comments they want to make about these projects that we have already approved and how we're going to go forward, and then looking at the things like the road diets and the
Okay.
other things. But I know Sean and I have talked about Lindsay and Elm Street for many times, and the improvements that were made at Chautauqua and Lindsay, the dedicated arrow, have been extremely helpful. We've talked about how that's a little bit more complicated to implement at Elm and Lindsay. Do we have any? I feel like the current setup is problematic. There's no easy way to address it. I don't know if our road project will address it or not in the future. Do we have any ideas?
We can certainly look at something like what we did at Chautauqua to see how it would work at Elm. That would be something that's pretty easy to do.
I know delaying traffic any more
Right.
on Lindsay Street is a problem, for sure. Any more, when 1 more minute is an issue, but it just, in that afternoons right there, it like I said, almost, or past Brooks many times I've seen, and
Well, and technology has gotten much better recently where you can make certain things happen only during certain times of the day. It could operate like it's operating now.
It's kind of
the
my
rest
hope with the
time.
traffic management
Right.
center and stuff that would be able to look at that while it's happening and adjust it. And so, I mean, 22 hours a day, there's no problem at all right there. So, okay. Well, I appreciate it very much that looking into this, and I'll look forward to the rest of council and us getting to talk about it hopefully in a few months or something.
Okay.
And then our third item on the agenda is a discussion regarding railroad safety in Norman. I wanted to bring up this topic because we've had the quiet zone for a couple of years now. Anytime there is an incident, I see people post online about, oh, we shouldn't have gotten rid of the quiet zone. And in my perception, we've had fewer incidents since then. And I was never convinced that the train horns prevented people from getting hit by the train because I never really felt like it was an accident to get hit by the train. And I know there's always circumstances, but and so kind of wanted to get maybe an update on train safety in Norman, how the quiet zone has been doing as far as incidents or any problems that we've experienced with it. And I just with Lynn that when I hear the train horn now, it means I know that there's probably an incident, like a serious thing that has happened. So it's kind of been like, I know it's only being used when there is something that's needed, So anyway, that's kind of what I want to talk about.
Wanna come up here?
You bet.
I don't know if you remember him or not, but this is Dr. Jack Webb. He
Glad
was
to be back. I see some familiar faces.
Yeah,
so-
yeah. I'm
very instrumental with what we needed to do to qualify for the quiet zone and helping us through that process.
And I've explained to people over the years that it wasn't the city council didn't just say, "Oh, we're doing it." And then it actually took several years to get
It
through
did.
the
There were a lot of
process.
steps.
And
Well, he and I are going to kind of tag team through this presentation a little bit. I'm going to get it started and then I'll give it to Jack and he'll give it back to me at the end.
some feel like we ran over the railroad, like we just pushed them around and made them do it. And I was like, no, I don't think so.
No,
Good luck with that, right?
I think they were as surprised as we were as we probably were that we were quite that ready. Well, I'm certain that they were really surprised that we
Yeah.
were quite that ready because we had done some work
Yeah.
prior to.
And then we ended up doing the whole city.
So it might have given the image that we ran over them, but we just were prepared whenever we started.
Could
the
not have done it
process.
if they didn't let us. That was
That's
actually,
true.
yeah,
Exactly. We don't just put up a sign and they stop blowing the horn, right?
right.
So we're going to talk through a little bit about the responsibilities for railroad safety, who does what, a little bit about the establishment of the quiet zone in Norman, the process that we went through, and then I'll take it back from Jack and I'll kind of go through some collision analysis that I did of the collisions pre-establishment and post-establishment of the quiet zone.
So when we talk about the responsibilities, the Federal Railroad Administration is the regulatory authority that we have to work with anytime we're doing railroad safety improvements. Now, it's kind of weird because we all get our funding for railroad safety improvements from the FHWA, just like the roadway folks do. But the regulators are the FRA, so we interact with both of them. Basically, they set up the rules for how you apply for a quiet zone, and they evaluate the applications, and they also do follow-up analysis on the corridors that have been quietened if they need it. There's certain criteria that you meet, and actually, fortunately, in Norman, we didn't even have to have follow-up evaluations, and our risk index was so low from the beginning because of some of the prior work that had been accomplished.
Okay.
ODOT oversees the safety projects as well as a lot of other rail-related activities, including the Heartland Flyer, of course, and then maintenance of some state-owned routes. The Corporation Commission is another regulatory authority that handles things at the state level. So anything that we want to do to a railroad crossing, as far as changing the level of warning, has to be approved by the Corporation Commission by an official order so that there's a legal document on file of why and when those changes were made. And then the city of Norman has stepped up or had to step up and does maintain all the additional appurtenances that we needed in order to establish the quiet zone, like the
Medians.
signs and the medians, yes, things of that nature. So what are quiet zones? They're basically zones along the track where the railroad is not supposed to sound the horn just on a regular basis. I mean, many of you probably lived here years when they sounded them at every crossing location throughout town. And, there were a lot of people, I think, over the years that thought, it's a little bit redundant to have all these lights and gates flashing, and then sound the horn every time they go through town. It's really kind of a quality of life issue, and the decreased noise level is something that a lot of communities, not just Norman, desire. And, I think the thing to remember that the train horns can only be silenced when you've got all the necessary safety improvements in place to do so.
Yeah,
we do.
there, I think from Post Oak Road to Indian Hill Road is 14 miles. And there are, I want to say 17 crossings
Yep.
in that 14 miles. So I would try to, when we were talking about passing this, I would try to explain to people that there, with that many crossings, 24 hours a day, and there's
32
roughly trains a day,
32
that's
trains
more
a
than one an
day, yeah.
hour, and it's like,
Yeah.
at every crossing, 24 hours a day. That's a long.
When do people sleep in Norman, right?
And I grew up right near the tracks, so I mean,
People tell me you get used to it. I don't know.
I mean,
live 3 or
used
4
to
miles
it.
away
Yeah,
from
it didn't mean I wanted it.
You really should anyway. So there we are. Quality of life issues are certainly.
And I wouldn't mention too the prohibited from sounding their horns. A lot of people think too that we've told that they can't use the horn at all.
Absolutely.
That we prohibit it, but that's not the case. They can and will if
Anytime.
they need to.
Anytime
Yeah.
they see something on the tracks or an issue that they feel is an unsafe condition, they will.
Ours just means that before they were, what I understood, they were required to do it at every stop
Every
on approach.
crossing. Yeah, they had whistle boards.
Regardless
So
of-
far in advance of the crossing based on the speed of the train, the average speed of the train, and they sound them at every crossing location.
I see.
And it's just like you said, that you hear it now, you think, what happened?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Obviously, there's some economic, or people have felt like there's some economic impact on the area. I mean, some businesses that were close to the tracks, I'm sure, felt like they were probably getting some of their business ran off or.
I experienced that in an office I worked in on Main Street. It was difficult to have a conversation on the phone.
Did you ever attend a performance at the depot? Pre-quiet zone?
Yeah, well, no, not a performance. I'd been to some meetings there and stuff.
Right.
But I did participate in a couple trials at the courthouse and before the quiet zone. And
They just take a pause, I
yeah,
guess.
every single time. So the attorney's in the middle of talking, or they're presenting something, and it's like, oh wait, gotta wait 2 minutes for that train to go by,
Right.
because it's loud without the horn, obviously when you're that close. But that was another experience I had, was at the courthouse and seeing how they were interrupted constantly trying to do business it was just too loud.
So I did check the stats, and there are currently listed that they have 32 trains a day. I think, well, I know during the holiday season that they're probably running actually a few more than that. So I think our estimate on the train horns every 45 minutes is relatively accurate still to this day.
And we estimated that train traffic could increase significantly over the next 30 years in this area.
Yes.
Like potentially double.
Yeah, well, they're trying to add some more track now.
Right.
So,
And then you add passenger rail potential and
Amtrak's
RTA
expanding.
and Amtrak and more freight trains. So
yep.
that was another issue. We were like, is it going to be one train every 20 minutes instead of every 45 minutes in the future.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And they are trying hard to boost the capacity by putting in some additional
Right.
track all up and down the line. In fact, I think they talked to you guys about some
Well, I know
right here.
Our underpass was built for that
Yeah.
expansion. I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, when the FRA was tasked with this, they had people putting in quiet zones in different places, and there were really no hard, fast rules. And when they were tasked with this, they went out and evaluated a lot of the factors, and they decided that they were going to come up with a baseline or a risk index threshold that basically assumed that you're going to have all gated locations. They were going to make everybody update their crossings to gated locations to even be qualified. So they went nationwide and looked at all the risk indices and came up with this nationwide significant risk threshold. The calculated risk of the crossings in a designated zone before any improvements are made was noted as the risk index with horns. Now, this is where we were extremely fortunate. We'd done some work, we'd done our homework and got some things completed, so our risk index was relatively low. One of the things that really drove it down were the one-way pairs on Main and Gray, because they had a significant amount of volume, and they're basically operating very similar to a four-quadrant gate location. They just don't have exit gates because you only have traffic flow in one direction.
Even though I always thought, because of the number of people I've seen drive the wrong way on Main Street over the years, that what if somebody wasn't paying attention and there's no gate on that side and they just
Well, no.
never happened, I guess, in here.
Well, I'll have to go
I
back
see
and look
people
at the
just
accident
driving the wrong way
management.
and they're looking at the side street or something.
I didn't notice a lot of, but at any
I
rate.
think people would notice a train going through that they wouldn't.
Yeah, I didn't notice a lot of indices or incidents where they
Yeah.
were going the wrong way. But I will say that, the one-way operations are similar to a four-quadrant
Sure.
for a two-way. So, and that, I think, was one of the was one of the things that drove our risk index way down and caught probably us and the railroad by surprise that we had such a low risk index with that many crossings in such a short zone. So the quiet zone risk index itself, whenever we went to evaluate it, it was completed on all the crossings in the zone in Norman, and basically it indicated that with the amount of improvements that we were proposing, that we were going to be below the nationwide significant risk threshold. So not only were we successful in our application to get a quiet zone, we weren't subjected to an annual review every year as well. Now, if we make some changes later on, we're probably going to be back to a situation where we'll have to undergo an annual review each year. And they look at things like the height of the curb and things like that. So, like on any median improvements that we suggest nowadays, we go with 8-inch curbs rather than 6, because if they come in and put an asphalt overlay in, then you automatically end up with less than 6 inches of clearance, and that location no longer qualifies.
I see.
And if you lose it one location in your entire zone,
Right.
they have to start using the horns throughout the whole thing until you get that
Fixed.
mitigated.
Okay.
Yep.
Make sure we mill and before we overlay.
Yes. Yes. So, if you'd have told me 5 years ago that we were going to have a few more, I would have been upset. But when I looked at the types of incidents that we've had, we had one incident where a motorcycle was left stranded on the tracks. I don't know if they ran out of gas, got hung up or whatever. We had one car hit on a private crossing, and there is one private
I
crossing
know the exact. It's in Ward 7.
in the zone. And
Very
they wouldn't
odd.
let us touch it other than to put signs on it to start with. So, you know, I mean, had it been public, we would have certainly put a set of gates on it because there's a building there that
Right.
blocks, you know, there's side obstruction issues and things like that. But they wouldn't let us touch it other than to put some signs on it. So, and then the rest of them have been pedestrian issues, which were the primary problem prior to the quiet
Right.
zone.
Intentional.
The problem with pedestrians are that they're gonna get on the tracks no matter what, I mean, you know, we can put some fence up, but there's still gonna be
At every crossing,
locations.
still be able to get
Every roadway, so, I went to an Operation Lifesavers, conference one time, and I was so excited, this was 20 years ago, whenever trespasser issues got to be a real big thing here in the United States, and I was so excited because there was a guy from England that was gonna talk about the things that they did for pedestrian issues. And so he talked about it, and he talked about overpasses and underpasses, which, you know, are a little bit expensive for just pedestrian. I mean, maybe in the middle of campus somewhere
Yeah.
they might, you know, and, and fencing, you know, and of course it has to be a pretty good fence, or obviously, or they'll cut holes in it or whatever. But when he got down to the final conclusion, I was sitting there just waiting to write something great down. He said, you know, what we finally discovered was that over 70% of trespassers that get hit on rail lines have a history of mental issues. So
yeah.
I think that we probably experience that even to this day. I just don't know that there's a solid solution for trespassing.
Yeah, I know it was like 9 out of 10 of pedestrians killed or in Norman over like a span of years were deemed to be suicide
Suicide, yeah.
by train, and there's a crossing every mile or every half mile or every quarter mile depending on where you're in.
You don't even have to have a crossing, you know. You
Right.
just run
Right,
out there.
it could be any point.
So anyway, they years ago kind of found out, I think, what we are slowly but surely all coming to realize here as well, that,
Yeah,
you know, there's a lot of things associated with trespasser issues that we're just never going to be able to put in enough improvements to.
I recall the year before we did the quiet zone, there was something like 7 in 1 year of incidents where pedestrians got hit by a train in Norman, and none of them were deemed accidents that I can recall. So that was like a higher than usual. I remember, like it was like, what's going on? Why is
All the collision reports and the information I got from the police department, none of them mentioned anything about accident. They all
Accidents,
mentioned suicide.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, even the non-suicidal collisions, one of them was a stranded vehicle, and then the other one was on the location that they wouldn't let us, or we couldn't spend any public funds to do
Right,
improvements on.
right.
So, really, I think it's been successful so far, you know.
And you said in those incidents, the train did use its horn
Yes,
as it
Yes.
approached those.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
and that showed up in the officers' comments, investigating officers' comments.
Yeah, they've got a little black box that records all, or, you know, that they pull information off of to make sure whether or not they were blowing their horn, or if they were going too fast, or,
Right.
you know, things of that nature.
Okay. Perfect.
So, overall,
Yeah,
in our case,
I'm trying to figure out what happened.
did I take your slide?
No, there's like 6 slides in the middle that were not in, we're not in. the top.
Disappeared?
Yes.
Oh, well.
I've got this
We
one
covered
and
it,
then,
though.
and then questions after that. Is the only
Yes.
2 I show on mine. So.
That's not what's in the hard copy that I have.
Okay.
Oh, I will.
But obviously, I mean, the things that we have to do moving forward is if there's a change that requires us to go back to those annual inspections, we're gonna be ready for those. You know, the quick curb where we didn't have room to install, that was one of the slides that had pictures of all the different things that we installed. Where we didn't have room to put the curbed median, we installed this quick curb with the panels that stick up. We're looking at those now to see it's kind of getting the end of their useful life on some of those. So we're looking to see which of those need to be replaced so that we could be ready for whenever that next annual inspection is called.
Maybe even evaluate them for median installation.
Yeah.
Start working with streets a little bit to see.
You know,
hey,
that
can we
road
do
diet on
that?
Boyd would sure help us
Yeah.
get some medians in there.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah,
That one's a
Boyd-
tricky one for people.
Boyd's got quick curve, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I know the two-way discussions have an impact on it, as you mentioned, and the medians and how we do the gate system.
Right.
And with that, well, I appreciate the info. We'd also, I think there were only two crossings left in what I consider the urban area that didn't have pedestrian crossings yet, Constitution and Brooks. And if I recall, we've done we've got the 10-foot multimodal path on Constitution under construction right now. It's looking nice. So that'll go on the north side there across. And then we would just have the south side connection
Get sidewalk with the widening
with
project.
with the Constitution project. And then on Brooks, we've done as much of the approach as we can do. And is that the way I understand it? That
I
we're,
think that there's some resolution that we can actually do that now, right?
Working through it, we're at a little bit of a legal impasse right now with BNSF and who's responsible and they have no opposition to doing it. But
They don't wanna
the
pay
state
for it.
law says that they're responsible to build it. And so we're having a little conversation. It's coming closer. I think we should have it wrapped up in 2020.
okay. Great. Yeah, like I said, that would be those would be the last two urban area crossings that would have pedestrian on both sides. So that's a big accomplishment, I think, and big deal when we get that done. So looking forward to that. And then, I just wanted to, have a follow-up on how it's gone since we implemented this and hopefully maybe clear up some misconceptions or thoughts folks might have about it, about whether the horns can be used or not, in which they can, and when needed. And that doing this hasn't really has not had a negative effect on safety. I think that's important to note as well.
Right.
So, and then future improvements, like we talked about. So I think that's really good too. And I think it's been, in my experience, a big success.
I think so.
I've heard from businesses downtown, residents that live near it. I mean, I've heard from some folks that reminisce about being sentimental for a train horn, and to me, I think the train horn, when I try to explain it, I'll say, well, in the olden days, the train horn was a whistle, right? A steam whistle maybe, and probably sounded different. But today it's a high-powered electric horn.
120 decibel air horn.
Yeah, like blow you out. And so it's not as, I have not had any sentimental thoughts towards dismissing the horn growing up near there and still living close enough, because you could hear it all the way on the other side of Norman. You could hear it on the other side of I-35 in Brookhaven at nighttime. So
I live off 108th, and if one happens to blow and the wind's blowing the right direction,
Yeah.
you can hear it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, again, I appreciate the update. I would encourage anybody watching that follows up, if you have any other questions about train crossings in Norman and safety in the quiet zone and future plans, please feel free to reflect on this meeting, but also contact me or city staff if you have any other comments or questions or suggestions. But like I said, I think it's gone very well compared to before, and has been an improvement. So I look forward to seeing what comes forward with Brook Street and the project at Constitution, and then how Main and Gray Street go in the future with the two-way conversion. So
Constitution, we're looking probably to wrap up, I'm going to say in February probably.
perfect. Yeah, it's looking really good. I drove through there yesterday, so very exciting. Okay, I think that's it for that item, and I believe that is it for anybody else here. So public comments. comment or anything? All right, that's it. Thank you all very much for being here. And this meeting is adjourned.
See you.